When watching Squid Game for the first time, the moment I knew I was gonna love the show was when they turned a kid's game as innocent as red light, green light into something that you had to survive to win. And if you so much as moved an inch during the red light period, well... And the same would go for all the other games, whether it's hide and seek or tug of war, you're playing for your life. And after watching seasons 2 and 3 and seeing how the story concluded for our main protagonist Gi-Hun, I have two major thoughts. One, all the games are purely luck based, specifically the one where people had to jump on glass. And second, money makes people do some really crazy things, because towards the end of season 3, you have a group of men literally debating whether or not to throw a baby off a ledge, and one of those men happened to be the child's father. But luckily for the baby, some people are willing to make a sacrifice. And when I say some, I mean the only person who was playing to save lives, my man Guhan. But what if the story had a different ending? One where Gi-Hun and the child were both able to survive. How would the world of Squid Game change for everyone in it? Would Gi-Hun still have this urge to go on this mission of destroying the games? Or would he start to view his life as something that's worth more than winning against the elites? Well, that's what we're here to find out. And before we get started, if you could leave a like on this video to support the channel, I'd appreciate it. And also, comment down below your favorite character in Squid Game and why they should have won. I'm trying to see something. But now, let's get into it. After knocking player 336 off the platform, the group is able to advance to the last section of the game. And now that Myung-gi and Son Gi-Hun have joined forces, they would have the upper hand by being the only two to have weapons and causing the remaining players to start to bicker amongst themselves to come up with another solution that involves the majority of them surviving. And while Myung-gi and Son Gi-Hun talk about the baby's well-being as well as the fact of why he didn't admit to being the father earlier, they notice the group start beating on player 39. And once he was barely conscious, the idea that they came up with is to turn him into a quote lunchbox, where they can carry him to the last platform and toss him off to win the game. But with Gi-Hun not willing to kill an innocent man, especially under those conditions, he holds up the knife and says that everyone is going to draw lots like player 100 suggested. But with them being so close to getting their money and freedom, this nobility that Gi-Hun has would frustrate all the remaining players and they would go on the attack and nearly getting the best of him and Myung-gi. But his 2 years of training would pay off in this situation because he's able to stab and kill player 203 while keeping himself and the baby unharmed. And when Myung-gi kicks 353 off the ledge, it would just be players 100, 456, 333, the half-beaten player 39, and the baby remaining on the platform. And when seeing that Myung-gi was aiming the pole at player 100, Gi-Hun called out for him to stop and think for a moment, and mentioning how they still have one more platform to go. Then he looks at player 100 and tells him, like I said, we're going to draw lots. But when the timer gets to 0 and the bridge extends, everyone's attention would be focused on the last platform and allowing for player 39 to inch his way over to the edge. And as Gi-Hun and Myung-gi tries to talk him down, it just wouldn't work, because since the game started, they all made it clear that they're going to target the weakest link. And with his leg broken and him being beaten half to death, he doesn't feel that he can trust anyone to keep their word. So as a metaphorical middle finger, he throws himself off the edge and dies on his own terms, completely surprising everyone. But while they were distracted by player 39's sacrifice, using this as an opportunity, player 100 grabs the baby and he runs across to the last platform and he holds her over the edge and tells him not to come any closer. But Gi-Hun tells him not to do it, and he even offers to kill himself in exchange for the child's life. But player 100 doesn't believe him, and he tries to explain to them saying that they can walk away all rich men if they just get rid of the baby. Then bringing up the fact that the mother's already dead and telling Myung-gi that he can always make another kid, especially with the money that they're about to get. And Myung-gi thinks for a moment and then he says, well, right now you haven't even pressed the button yet, so if you kill the child, it would just be for nothing. Leaving Gi-Hun confused as to where Myung-gi's loyalties lie. And because player 100's near the edge and the button's in the center of the platform, he tries to rush over to press it. But within that time, both Gi-Hun and Myung-gi are able to cross the bridge and the three of them are now on the last platform. And although they have their weapons, with player 100 still holding the baby, it does keep him at the advantage. And with the button now pressed and the timer counting down, Gi-Hun says once again that he would give his life if the baby was spared, and proving it by putting the knife on the ground and walking backwards towards the edge. Myung-gi would also put the pole down and he tells player 100, before he sacrifices himself, put my daughter down and you step away from her. And once the baby was safe, While Gi-Hun is standing on the edge and player 100 is standing on the other side of the platform, Myung-gi would be standing in the middle looking down at his baby. And understanding that someone is going to have to die here, and seeing firsthand how Gi-Hun was willing to do anything to protect the child, Myung-gi knows that he could never measure up to that. And if he were to do at least one right thing in his life, it would be to give his daughter a chance. So he looks over at Gi-Hun and says, "Just take care of her." And he charges towards player 100 to grab him, and they both fall off the edge and die next to each other. Gi-Hun then carefully picks up the baby, and he looks towards the glass window that the frontman and the VIPs are watching from. And in a matter of 10 minutes, the game ends and the child and Gi-Hun are announced as the winners. But interrupting the celebration would be the Coast Guard, who has the place surrounded by helicopters, ships, and soldiers who are all moving inside the building. And watching from the monitors, the frontman would see the masked workers and the Coast Guard engaged in a firefight. But prepared for an event such as this, the frontman escorts the VIPs to a secret room where they can get off the island safely. And seeing that there's more than enough time before the Coast Guard soldiers reach him, the frontman activates the self-destruct sequence to destroy the building and everyone inside. But while still having no clue as to what's happening, Gi-Hun just stands on a platform holding the baby. And emerging from a hidden elevator inside the platform, the frontman, who's now unmasked, tells Gi-Hun to come with him to collect his prize money. But being apprehensive on trusting In-ho, Gi-Hun says, "What's going on?" Because even though he's in a completely different part of the building, he does hear the alarm going off as well as gunfire in the distance. And In-ho simply tells him, "The game is over, Gi-Hun. You won. Now it's time for you to go home." But with his question unanswered and still not entirely believing him, Gi-Hun says, "What's with the alarm? You need to tell me what's happening out there now." And knowing that this is a time-sensitive issue, In-ho cuts to the chase and says, "The building is set to explode, and if you don't come with me, you and the baby will die." And not wanting to put the baby in danger, Gi-Hun follows him down the elevator. And after going through a few corridors and secret passageways, they find themselves on a luxury submarine with several monitors showing what's going on inside the island. And together, they watch as the Coast Guard is swarming through the building. But on one monitor to the frontman's office, In-ho sees his brother who's standing right where he was mere moments ago. And as they watch the timer count down to 0, they would see the building explode and the island start to go up in flames, and killing everyone inside, including Coast Guards, masked workers, and Detective Jun-ho, who came all this way just to die with no answers. And as all the monitors cut out and lose signal, Gi-Hun questions In-ho saying, "I need you to tell me why. All these people dead. For what? Your entertainment?" And In-ho responds saying, "The sad truth is, yes. But we can't pretend that we forced anyone to participate. Everyone, including yourself, joined by your own free will." But Gi-Hun snaps back saying, "That is bullshit and you know it. If anyone thought they were going to lose their lives by playing kid games, nobody would have signed up for this." And in response he says, "Well, you did." And while pouring himself a drink, In-ho continues to say, "The only person, and I mean the only person who didn't sign up for this is that baby that you're holding. But now, she will want for nothing. So in the end, we did her a favor." But as Gi-Hun is still trying to get his point across, In-ho would turn his back and sneakily put his mask on. And in the middle of Gi-Hun's lecture, the submarine would start to fill with gas. And as much as he fights it by trying to cover his mouth, in a matter of seconds, his vision starts to blur. And the frontman's mask will be the last thing he sees before everything fades to black. An unknown amount of time passes before Gi-Hun regains consciousness and he finds himself once again on the streets of South Korea. And right next to him would be the baby, who's now in a Squid Game branded bassinet. And after making sure that the child was okay, inside his pocket he would have a small envelope with a golden credit card inside. And having been through this before, he knows that his winnings are there. So while on his way back to the Pink Motel, he makes a stop at a store to get some food for the baby as well as a new bassinet. And once he makes it back to the Pink Motel, he has to sit with the fact that he was the one out of hundreds of people who died to get that money. And hundreds more will probably die as the games continue on. And as much as he doesn't want to admit it, this might just be something that he could never stop as he thinks back to his best friend being killed right in front of him for even trying. And while looking down at the baby, he's reminded of his daughter that he's been neglecting for years. And he starts to look at his life as a gift. And maybe given the fact that he's made it out alive twice, he starts to think that he's probably spending his time the wrong way. And after everything that he's been through, he gets the feeling that he's here for more than just his own self-destruction. So as he walks around the empty hotel, he looks at the armory and the makeshift shooting range, and he realizes that he doesn't need any of this anymore. And he decides to do something that he should have done 2 years ago. So after a few days, we pick up with Gi-Hun as well as the baby inside the airport. But unlike the last time he was there, he's not looking for a recruiter to play Dachi. And instead, he's able to board a plane with his destination being Los Angeles to be with his daughter. Back over at the penitentiary, Woo-Sok is being released on bail, and when asked who bailed him out, he's only given a letter with a key. And it would appear to be from Gi-Hun, and he basically tells him that he's sorry for bringing him into this, and he tells him that his days of searching train stations are over, with the last thing on the note saying that the Pink Motel and everything inside of it now belongs to him. So after being picked up by his friend, they rush over to the Pink Motel to check out what's all there. And when he arrives, he's nearly brought to tears when he sees the huge pile of cash still on the bed frame. And he couldn't have been happier to cross paths with Gi-Hun, because this just makes everything that he's been through worth it. Over in the cemetery, we pick up with In-ho, who's leaving flowers for his wife as well as his brother. And as he's grieving that he never got a chance to make things right with them, he compartmentalizes his emotions and leaves the area before being seen. And as he gets into his car, before pulling away, he would see his mother entering the cemetery to leave flowers as well. And as she kneels down to say a prayer, she looks in the direction of In-ho. And just for a moment, they make eye contact before he pulls away. And this would give her a slight comfort knowing that she didn't lose both of her sons. And as she continues to pray, she hopes that one day he'll return to her. But as In-ho is being driven around the streets of South Korea, he receives a phone call that the new place for the games will be operational within a month. And he says in response, "Start gathering new contestants," and letting us know that the games are far from over. Once Gi-Hun arrives in Los Angeles, he just shows up at his daughter's door completely unannounced. And when she answers the door, she cannot believe that it's him. And although they haven't seen each other in years, he still finds a way to make her laugh to break the tension. And after apologizing for not being there for her, he tells her that he's never going to leave her again. And as she goes in for a hug, just off to the side, the baby will be sitting in a carrier. And he introduces his daughter to her saying, "I'll explain everything. But for now, this is Sae-byuk," named after the woman that he did the first Squid Game with. And now that he's reunited with his family, for the first time since he can remember, Son Gi-Hun is finally at peace. Hey everybody, and thank you for watching another video. And in my opinion, I think this ending would suit Gi-Hun's story a bit more than him just throwing himself off a cliff. I mean, I get the symbolism, but how is he going to make a bigger sacrifice for a random kid instead of his own? Because between seasons 2 and 3, all he does is call his daughter and breathe on the phone. That's it. At least in this story, he's actually able to be with his family and at the same time raise his little child together. And although it may not be the perfect circumstances, in my opinion, it's way better than what we got. But that's just me. But now I want to hear from you guys. What you think of this story? Did you like it? Is there anything that you change? And what's another what if that you'd like for me to cover? Whatever it is, let me know down below in the comments and I'll do my best to respond. And if you want videos early, access to my private Discord, and having your name shouted out at the end of every video, consider becoming a member of the channel. But again, no pressure. I appreciate you all the same just for watching and leaving a like. But that'll do it for me on this video. Until next time, my name is Merge. Later.